right. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn, celebrating celebration, history, and perspectives. I am Griffin Binkowski, and I'm an educator here at the History Center. And I'd like to welcome everybody joining us here in person and everybody joining us via the live webinar. I'll make sure to leave some time at the end for questions, and for those joining us online, please feel free to leave questions and comments in the chat, and Shay can relay those to me. Celebration is famously known as the town that Disney built. It lies just south of Walt Disney World in Osceola County and is heralded as an idyllic return to small-town American life. Every year, tourists, prospective buyers, and interested locals visit for a glimpse into the Disney-fied community. I have long been interested in Celebration's history and design, not only because of its connection to the parks, but because I was born and raised in Celebration. My parents, John and Shona, were one of the very first families to purchase a home plot in Celebration nearly 30 years ago, and my sister Natalie and I grew up as some of the first Celebrationite kids. Celebration has a unique and almost hyper-real story that I was lucky enough to experience firsthand, and I'm excited to share that history and my perspective with you all today. So for today's talk, I will begin by focusing on the origins of the idea of celebration, as well as the Disney Company's collaboration with Osceola County. Next, I will detail the community's new urbanist design, initial residency, and early community life. I will then cover Disney's relinquishment of celebration and the community's existence today. To conclude, I will present some mysteries, controversies, and quirks of the town. Throughout the talk, I will also sprinkle in bits of my own childhood and connection to the town, hopefully providing an insider's perspective. So many people call Celebration the town that Disney built, but because it is unincorporated, it is actually legally considered a census-designated place. So a more accurate statement would be that Celebration is the community that Disney built. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to call it a town still. It is located in Osceola County and is technically part of the larger city of Kissimmee. The entire town is about 10 square miles and located about 9 miles away from Walt Disney World. Celebration is split into various villages, which I've listed on the screen, and the original village is Celebration Village, but with the other villages built out from that central point. We always called it Main Village growing up, but I guess it was recently changed to foster a sense of village equality. Within Celebration Village, there is a commercial area called Downtown Celebration where people can shop and dine. Beyond that, there are various parks, lakes, gyms, pools, playgrounds, and community centers available to residents. There's one public high school and one public K-8 school that is connected to Osceola County, and a handful of small private schools. Not only did I attend the K-8 school, but I actually became a substitute teacher there and taught for 3 years. As of 2024, about 12,000 people live in Celebration. Although that sounds like a big number, everybody still knows everybody's business. So we cannot begin to look into Celebration's history without delving a bit into the history of Disney's Florida project. On October 24th, 1965, the Orlando Sentinel broke the news that Walt Disney was the mystery land buyer who had bought nearly 27,400 acres of swampland in Orange and Osceola counties. In 1966, Walt Disney and Company produced a promotional video outlining their plans for the acquired land. The Florida Project, as it was called, would occupy a space nearly 170 times larger than the original Disneyland in Anaheim, California. In Disney's own words, it was so large that it would become a whole new Disney World. Yeah. The new area would have its own airport, a visitor complex that would receive tourists, an industrial park area, a theme park area with surrounding hotels, and an area called Epcot. Epcot stood for the Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow, and it was the passion project of Walt Disney in his later years. Epcot was a community designed to be a blueprint for future communities. It was to be always in a state of becoming, incorporating the latest technologies, the newest ideas, and always constantly improving. It was to be a living showcase of American innovation and industry. Walt thought that many of the downfalls of modern urban society could be remedied by careful planning that would cater to the needs of the resident and to the American corporation. In Epcot, the pedestrian was king, and the automobile was secondary, reserved to a discrete and partially underground road system with no stoplights. The community was to be arranged in a radial design. You can kind of see that here. He's pointing to it. At the center, there would be a high-density city commercial area, and surrounding that, there would be a green belt, a nature-filled space for recreation and community activities. And finally, there would be a residential/suburban ring where employees of the industrial park and the theme park could live. A high-speed monorail would connect Epcot to all other facilities, and a people mover would make automobiles barely used by the average resident. In Epcot, it would never be dreary outside either, because the central area was to be completely encapsulated by a temperature-regulated dome. Unfortunately, Walt Disney's vision of Epcot as an experimental community of tomorrow would never come to fruition. Only weeks after filming his Florida Project video, Walt Disney passed away at the age of 65 on December 15, 1966. His corporation was left with 27,000 acres of land and a preliminary master plan. Discussions shifted to Epcot's future. Many people, including Walt's brother Roy and close friend Ward Kimball, were hesitant about the logistics of Epcot. How would a company be able to control human nature? There had been company-owned and controlled towns in the past that had ended in resident revolts, such as the 1880s railroad car manufacturing town of Pullman, Illinois. Instead, Roy Disney focused his efforts on fulfilling his brother's vision of a Florida theme park, only addressing Epcot when it was needed. The 1966 video outlining Epcot aided in getting official approval of the establishment of the Reedy Creek Improvement District in 1967. This freed the Disney Company from Florida legislation concerning planning and maintenance, and which would otherwise most likely not have been granted to just a theme park alone. After Roy's death in 1971, only a few months after opening of Walt Disney World, the company shifted hands yet again. Disney's futuristic community idea was tabled for some time. In 1975, Card Walker, the president of Walt Disney Productions, announced that Epcot would be built, but it would take a very different shape from Walt's original vision. It would not be a community, but a theme park that functioned as sort of a permanent World's Fair. The technology and innovation aspect of the original community, Epcot community, would be showcased in the Future World area of the park. The World Showcase part of the park would be occupied by pavilions, showcasing various countries' architecture and culture. This version of Epcot, the one we know today, officially opened in 1981. Something more akin to celebration as we know it today was beginning to be discussed seriously in the late 1980s. With the appointment of Michael Eisner as company chairman in 1984, an era of aggressive development began in Central Florida. This was to kickstart the 1990s as what the company dubbed the Disney Decade. In the mid-1980s, the Disney Development Company was formed, comprised of a team of real estate development professionals that would report directly to Eisner and company president Frank Wells. According to Tom E. Lewis, the director of residential development, the project was called the Osceola Mixed Use Development, or OMUD, and it handled all Florida Disney developments of this era. The land acquired by Disney in the 1960s had provided room for the planned expansions and developments of theme parks like Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Hollywood Studios. But even so, much of the property still lay unused. It would be harder to develop and even harder to sell in future years. A combination of intentional expansion and the need to develop this property revived the idea of creating a community. Once this expansion was decided upon, the planning began. In 1987, Disney hosted an invitation-only design competition with some of the world's most renowned architects. This was done to gather ideas that could be later incorporated into a developmental master plan for the property. It would take a few years before the final architects who would construct the final master plan were chosen. Originally, much more than a residential community was planned for the area. An announcement in April 1989 indicated that Disney Company planned to develop a high-end shopping mall on U.S. Highway 192 near I-4. Michael Eisner also introduced the Disney Institute, that some may remember here, a vacation resort focused on the hands-on learning experience in a fun, vacation-friendly atmosphere. There were also plans for an attraction called The Workplace, which provided guests a behind-the-scenes look at how different products and innovations are designed, prototyped, and produced from start to finish, all with a certain Disney flair. The mall and workplace ideas were eventually dropped, but the Disney Institute, which really deserves its own lunch and learn, was built in 1996 and closed in 2003. There were also plans for corporate and business office spaces and additional shopping mall areas. A planned residential community really began to take shape after the regional impact documents were submitted to gain approval for local governments. Once a planned community was confirmed, they had to choose a name. According to Tom E. Lewis, the naming process was long and rigorous. Disney wanted to create a community, but they did not want it to be directly tied to Disney. At one point, according to Tommy Lewis, there had been a master list of 264 potential names, and some were even focus group tested at Epcot. Some of the finalists include Horizons, Ameritown, Hyperion Madeira, and Dimensions. Eventually, after 16 months of discussion, the name Celebration was chosen. The community was announced to government and business officials in April of 1991. On May 6, 1991, an intention to use application was filed with the U.S. Trademark Office to register the name Celebration. Celebration was publicly announced in August of 1991, though many locals already speculated what was going on. Celebration was announced, but how would a Disney-built community actually work? What would it look like? Who would build it? To tackle these questions, the Disney Development Company established the Celebration Company in the early 1990s. The company would be a subsidiary of the Disney Company and handle all dealings with the town. In the early 1990s, architects groups Cooper, Robertson and Partners and Robert A.M. Stern were selected to construct the final master plan. Stern had previously worked on Disney projects as well as the Norman Rockwell Museum, and Robertson had worked on Battery Park City in New York City and the New Albany community in Columbus, Ohio. The landscape firm EDAW designed the many park spaces and green areas found throughout Celebration. The town is built in a new urbanist style, which is an architectural and city planning movement that arose in the 1980s as a critique to suburban sprawl. The style emphasizes mixed-use areas, diverse ethnicities, incomes, families, and widespread walkability. Buildings are intentionally closer together to foster a sense of community and increase conversation. That's why our yards are so small. There are several types of residents grouped together. Mansions are right next to condos or cottages. There's a large element of nature incorporated into Celebrations of design. There are plenty of playgrounds, dog parks, pools, and recreation areas. At the center of Celebration, there's a central downtown that radiates outward. This is the downtown area, and it's radiating outward. To quote New Urbanism's official website, these design elements would, quote, add up to a high quality of life worth living and create places that enrich, uplift, and inspire the human spirit. The tenets of New Urbanism aligned incredibly well with Disney's intentions for Celebration. The new urbanist design would foster a sense of community and progress characteristic of Disney. But this community was also designed to be familiar, welcoming, and family-friendly. Eisner and designers wanted to create a town that was an amalgamation of ideas from small pre-World War II towns. To quote the original pamphlet advertising Celebration, we took the best ideas and practices from the most successful towns of yesterday and adapted them for a community of tomorrow. Stern and Robertson visited and photographed towns like Charleston, Mount Pleasant, East Hampton, New Orleans, Savannah, and St. Augustine for inspiration. They would use the most successful ideas and apply them to Celebration. There was even talk about fabricating a backstory for Celebration as a town founded by conquistadors and inhabited by different eras to explain the different town styles. However, this idea was soon dropped, and here's an image on the screen that represents just how much inspiration they took from these towns. This is an example of Spanish Revival architecture found in St. Augustine. That is Flagler College, and there's a home in Celebration. It looks like they should live next to each other, right? Celebration would also conveniently incorporate features inspired by Walt Disney's Epcot. To be perfectly clear, Celebration is not a reincarnation of Epcot. However, it is very fortunate that many design elements are similar to some aspects of the original Epcot, such as the radial town center and less reliance on cars due to walkability. Celebration was never intended to remain fully under Disney's control. From the beginning, the first step of this process was de-annexing Celebration from the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Disney was intending for Celebration to sell homes to permanent residents. Because there would be permanent residents, the Reedy Creek Improvement District government would have to be opened for public voting, which could greatly impact Disney's operations. So instead, Celebration was de-annexed in 1994. Osceola County would handle police and fire responses and oversaw building codes, and Celebration oversaw parks and roads. It was also established that the Celebration Residential Owners Association and the town center area would cease to be run by the Celebration Company, subsidiary of Disney, when at least 75% of all residential units were sold, or in 40 years, depending on whatever came first. Additionally, Disney would form a partnership with the Osceola County School District to establish a new K-12 school for the Celebration residents' kids. Construction on Celebration officially broke ground on May 18th, 1994. While the community was being constructed, word had spread fast about Disney's new town. Many people wanted to know what life was like in Celebration. So the Celebration Company created a preview center for prospective residents to visit. But, to quote the architect's website, the irony was that the preview center had nothing to preview. The town infrastructure was nearly complete, but there were no homes for people to inspect. The preview center was a grouping of trailers surrounded by full-size watercolor renderings of what typical Celebration homes and styles would look like. Biber Architects, who designed this, described the interior design as an unfinished house interior, also in a work in progress, complete with exposed wood stud walls, rooms with open walls, and a floor painted with the blueprint of the actual project design. They were trying to really feed into this, hey, we're not done yet vibe. And there's some examples of the preview center. Also in the center was information outlining the various home styles and sizes that would be available in Celebration by way of the infamous pattern books. I'll talk about that later. There were, and still are, 6 styles of home in Celebration that you could have: classical, Victorian, colonial revival, coastal, Mediterranean, and French. Decor, architecture, and paint colors must adhere to your style's parameters found within the pattern books. There were also 6 sizes of home available: estate, village, cottage, garden, and townhome. The preview center remained standing for 18 months and had over 50,000 visitors pass through its doors. This is my parents. They are very excited to be in the preview center. Yes, and they are picking out, they say, oh, we want to live right there. Okay. All right, so you've heard the news. You've visited the preview center. How would you get one of these homes? Well, to keep things fair and adhere to the diversity tenet of new urbanism, a lottery was held to fill the first 351 available homes. About 5,000 people arrived in Celebration on November 18th, 1995, hoping for a chance to own a home in Disney's new community. 1,200 deposits of $1,000 were submitted to enter the lottery, just to enter. It was refundable, though. Although most of the downtown retail and business center had been completed, the homes had not been. People were entering based on what they had seen in the preview center and on a Disney promise. If your name was chosen, then you had a chance to meet with a realtor and select your home style and size. Homes ranged from about $170,000 to upwards of $1 million, but that was mainly reserved for estate homes. And remember, this is all in 90s dollars. My parents, the Binkowskis, were one of the names pulled. My parents chose a Kensington model coastal-style cottage home. But before it was a home, it was a plot of dirt with a fancy sign. Celebration would print the family's name on a sign and stake it in the front plot, in the front of their plot. My mom would tell me she made regular visits to the site to see how progress would be going on their home. She also said it took almost 7 months for their home to be completed from purchase date to move in. And here are my parents in the Celebration paper saying, hey, we just moved in. This is also a picture of their home plot. And if you can see the buildings way in the back, that is the downtown area, which is a 15-minute walk away. It's all covered with houses now, but that's really how much they had not developed it yet. Many amenities and expansions were introduced in the early years, such as a state-of-the-art school, spa-like hotel and health center, movie theater, golf club, and more. On November 12th, the first Founders' Day was celebrated, recognizing the first families who were pioneers living in Disney's new town. This day also officially marked the opening of the restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues in the Disney-owned downtown area. There were no massive chain restaurants, and there was great care taken to select businesses that fit the Celebration vibe. There was a small market for groceries, a bookshop, a cafe, and other quaint businesses one would associate with typical small-town America. My mom also recalls that for a short period of time, people were allowed to take paddle boats on the small man-made lake in the center of town. Imagining paddling the swan boats of Lake Eola around in like a puddle. Yeah, it's very small, but yeah. Dun dun dun. So, one of the most notable amenities introduced was the Celebration School. It was a draw for many families moving to Celebration. Opened in 1996, the school was a highly innovative K-12 school that used a Harvard-designed education program. Children would not work in classrooms, but in 100 school neighborhoods, with teams of teachers renamed as experts. Their schedule would be focused on forming a future career and tutoring students in lower grades than them. Every child, kindergarten to 12th grade, would study a foreign language. The school quickly outgrew its placeholder building, and a new school large enough to accommodate a rising number of children was planned starting back in 1994. The building itself was also designed to embrace technology and innovation, keeping in line with the Disney standard. But adherence to this standard would come with a hefty price tag. Osceola County would not be able to afford the construction of the proposed building, with the nearly $22.8 million estimate exceeding the $14 million delegated by the county. Remember, this is 90s dollars. So, Disney agreed to pitch in, putting forth millions of dollars and donating the needed land for the school. They also developed the Celebration Teaching Academy, a facility right next to the school that offered substantial training to teachers. Disney paid for necessary construction and hiring costs, but also some fancy extras, like state-of-the-art technology, which were the Big Macs at the time, grand towers on the corner of the school, and a boardwalk through the marsh area that led to the sports fields. The new campus opened in 1997. And I just thought this was funny. It says, Here's your bill, Mickey. And it outlines all the things they got to pay for. Some non-celebration residents were excited with this school because it was still associated with the county. It was a public school. Disney's additions made it highly desirable amongst surrounding communities. 80% of the children would be from Celebration, but the other 20% of children would be from the surrounding Osceola County. There was even talk of a lottery system to choose non-celebration students, but ultimately parents would have to apply in a way similar to a magnet school. Conversely, some non-celebration residents were frustrated that their tax dollars would go towards a virtually private Disney school that was disproportionately advantaged. They argued that Celebration did not need additional funding because Disney was already backing the project. Eventually, many Celebration residents also became frustrated with the school, criticizing their unorthodox teaching methods. Some dubbed it as a waste of time and cited serious academic shortcomings as the reason for withdrawing their students. There were no grades, no report cards, and no desks. Children were allowed to be noisy and exploratory of their interests. Nearly 14% of children were withdrawn within the first 6 months of the school's opening, and 6 of the 21 teachers quit. I couldn't find an exact date for when the curriculum switched back, but it did very quickly. Yes. As Celebration grew, the Celebration School grew with it, and eventually it outgrew its new school. Osceola County was also growing. So in the summer of 1999, the Celebration Company entered into an agreement with Celebration County School Board to build a new high school. The 9th through 12th graders from Celebration School would be moved to the new high school, making the original school a purely K-8 school. The new high school would also alleviate Poinciana's high school overcrowding. However, Celebration residents were not happy with this expansion. They claimed that they had been promised a small, walkable town that fit Disney's vision. Some residents, a small number of them, thought that the nearly 50% of non-Celebration students would bring an influx of crime, lower school standards, and decrease in property value. Others thought that the construction of another high school was just a ploy to build and sell more residential homes by Disney. CARE, the Celebration Area Residents for Education, was formed by a small number of residents to express concerns. Here is a quote from their petition against the high school. I am against the location of large-scale education environments or facilities in Celebration and petition Disney and the Celebration Company to locate such facilities outside of Celebration and to set up a research department to procure alternative funding to maintain the vision of high-quality, safe neighborhood K-12 schools within walking distance of homes for Celebration children. And by the way, you can still walk to the high school. It's like a 20-minute walk, but you can walk. However, the project moved forward, and Celebration High School opened in 2003. By the way, I was born in 2000 and did not go to this high school. I went to Osceola County School for the Arts. Another massive controversy bloomed shortly after the school debacle in 2002. The Celebration Company proposed 3 possible hotels that would be within Celebration land. A luxury 4-seasons resort that had 2,039 school rooms and nearly 150 timeshare locations was proposed in the southwest region. Another hotel would be positioned right next to the high school that was being built, and yet another would flank the office park right next to Celebration. Residents were concerned with how hotels would affect the community, routing traffic patterns and breaking that small town feel. My mom recalls that how in the early years of Celebration, many people in large groups, and sometimes still do, tour the community, taking pictures and writing things down on clipboards, treating it kind of like Disney's attraction. I also have memories as this. As a kid, it was normal for me to see roaming groups of tourists on segways, ogling at our town and my sister as we played in the backyard. Yeah. The biggest concern was the proximity to the high school in regard to these hotels. Residents were concerned that alcohol and tourists would overrun the nearby school. A group called the Celebration Patriots was formed, t-shirts and all, and contest the proposals brought forth by the once beloved company that built Celebration. Today, the only hotels in Celebration are the original Celebration Hotel, a small 115-room bed and breakfast style hotel located in the middle of town, and the Malia, a larger hotel located on the outskirts of Celebration across from the hospital. As stated before, Disney never intended to own the town forever. They wanted Celebration to be a real place, not a Disney-fied tourist destination. In talking to Tom Sonnerberg, a senior development manager involved in the creation of Celebration, this was very much evident. Celebration had ticked all the boxes Disney had strived to fill, and now it was time to let the town come into its own without the guiding hand of Disney. In September of 2003, homeowners assumed majority membership of the Homeowners Association. Shortly after, Disney sold the golf course to CS Golf Partners. On January 22, 2004, the news broke in the local newspapers that Disney had sold the downtown area to Lexan Capital, a private real estate firm. This had been the most visible of Disney's connection to Celebration. The area sold included 18 acres of 16 shops, 6 restaurants, and 105 residential apartments. Disney's name was stripped from the iconic water tower outside of the town, and Lexan converted the apartments downtown into condos. Disney had officially taken a very massive, large step back from the community. In 2010, Celebration experienced 2 events that would solidify its new status as a normal town. In December 3rd, 2010, the first homicide occurred in Celebration. Only a few days later, the first suicide occurred. I was in school during the latter, and I vividly remember our school being put on full lockdown for several hours. The man's home was right across the street, and the police were not taking any chances. I had actually gone to return a library book and got stuck in the library right as they were putting us down in lockdown, and the whole school was trying to find me by calling everywhere, but eventually they did. The next day, the principal came to each of our classes and told us what had happened. The events shook up the town, creating a crack in this perfect perceived Disney foundation. In my opinion, this marked the turning of Celebration into a normal community. The image of a perfect town was no more. A normal community has flaws, and tragedy happened, and it is the town's response and methods of healing that strengthen community bonds. There's a lot of speculation about living in Celebration. People ask if it is like Stepford Wives or a utopian Disneyland, but in reality, it's a normal town with a flashy Disney veneer. We have petty community drama, middle schoolers that terrorize our downtown, regular maintenance issues, and home break-ins. Celebration is also growing more and more diverse as new homes are developed and new residents move in. It has become less of a tourist attraction and more a place to have dinner and meet with friends on a Saturday, though it still does get really, really crazy during the holidays. Today, Celebration is a town like any other with flaws and bright spots. What drew people in is the promise of community, and great care is taken to maintain those high standards set in the early years. Community events, volunteer efforts, and town-wide initiatives are constantly going on. The original arts and culture group founded in 1996, the Celebration Foundation, still works hard to promote community engagement and interaction with the arts, culture, and education. There are farmers markets on the weekend and parades for almost every holiday. But it is still not a utopia or some secret Disney cult, just a town where people are highly passionate about their community. Trust me, ask anyone in Celebration about the pickleball courts and you will see just how passionate we are. Celebration has shed its Disney training wheels and has become a real town. Imperfections and hiccups exist, but the community works to make them better. So now the juicy stuff. Now, I'd like to briefly cover some town lore and frequently discussed things amongst the residents. Ask anyone who is a Celebration local, and I assure you they will have something to say on any of these. One of the landmarks of Celebration is the movie theater. Dubbed AMC Celebration 2, it was a small two-screen theater with spires that bore the name of the town. It was built in 1996 and designed by architect Cesar Pelle in the 1930s, 1950s modern-ish style. I have fond memories of playing in the arcade next to the snack stand and walking downtown on weekends to see a film with my family. I even saw the first Finding Nemo in this theater. Seems like a perfect place for a date night on a Saturday matinee, right? But unfortunately, the theater has been closed for nearly 15 years, allegedly by AMC's own choice. When AMC began work on the massive 24-screen theater in Walt Disney's Resort's Pleasure Island in 1997, now renamed Disney Springs, the park had one stipulation. It had to also take on the existing two-screen theater in Celebration. They agreed and showed only family-friendly films in the theater until 2004. No PG-13, no R-rated. But when Lexan took over, they agreed to enter a lease agreement with AMC. Allegedly, AMC figured it was more cost-effective and would drive more business to the larger theater if Celebration Theater were to close. So AMC closed the location on November 28th, 2010 with little fanfare. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was showing. The lease on the property ended on October 31st, 2021, and there was an attempt to negotiate reopening, but it did not happen. Lexan allowed CROA, Celebration's HOA, to lease the building and is still deciding on what the property will turn into. Fortunately, Front Porch Theater Incorporated is a local group who seeks to reopen the theater as an entertainment venue and is, quote, currently looking for investors to make this $2 million project come to life. So if you have $2 million and want to go to the theater in Celebration, reach out. Yeah, you read the title, right? Walt Disney World. It is in the downtown area of Celebration, right across from the aforementioned theater, right there. There is a splash pad in the shape of a compass that children can play around in. It has been there since the town's inception, and my sister and I spent many Saturdays splashing around in it after messily eating an ice cream cone. In 2019, the fountain underwent renovations. However, bloggers soon noticed that there had been some critical errors made by the contractor and began posting pictures to Twitter. Walt had been misspelled as Wald, and the Captiva Island was also misspelled as Captatava Island. Some of the guide markers also needed to be realigned to be pointed in the right direction. Yeah, they did a really stellar job. The Celebration Pardon Our Dust signs went promptly up and stayed up for a couple of months while the mistakes were corrected. When you enter Celebration from Walt Disney World, or from World Drive, there is a lovely sign welcoming you to Celebration. You'll notice that sign looks suspiciously like a wall, because it is a wall. Behind the wall is a retention pond that locals have nicknamed the Death Pond. When Celebration was first built in 1996, there were no wall there and few lights, with only a stop sign and a very hard left turn. You can see it right here. This is from a newspaper that has some temporary barriers up, but that was not there originally. The first incident occurred in 1998 when a young woman failed to make the turn and drove into the pond and drowned, unfortunately. While pulling up her car, they discovered a few other cars that had ended up in the retention pond, some that had been stolen. Another incident occurred in 1999 when a car was pulled up containing the bodies of 3 men who had been missing for nearly 9 months. They, too, failed to make the turn and ended up in the pond. They were a group of friends from out of town who came to Florida on a week-long vacation. Eventually, county officials later added signage and a flashing light and a fence to help prevent any further incidents. Even with these precautions, more cars have ended up in the pond, with the most recent occurring in 2021 with the wall. There is no one officially tracking the number of incidents associated with this pond, but from my research, I have counted at least 6 cars and 5 deaths. Fortunately, incidents have greatly declined after the construction of the Celebration wall sign, which I struggled to find an exact date for. But I do know it has been there for a while, but still, before 2021. I think it is pretty common knowledge that Celebration maintains a rather strict HOA. To end the lunch and learn on a light note, I would like to share some of the more specific rules. So from the flagpoles and flags design guidelines, the U.S. flag must always be the largest flag displayed and must be displayed in a matter of prominence raised above other flags. Patriotic flags displayed during the hours of darkness should always be lit, which generally means the stars and stripes can be seen from a reasonable distance. We don't know how much that distance is, but a reasonable one. From the lighting design guidelines, lights shall not be permitted amongst the sidewalk. Do not put lights on your sidewalk. Lighting fixtures must be black, dark green, dark brown, or bronze. That's it. Nothing else. From the recreation and play equipment design guidelines, you are allowed one basketball hoop, one. Only nylon nets, no chains. And the back of the backboard shall be positioned towards the owner's property to minimize damage to adjacent property and the nuisance of overthrown balls that might cause to neighbors. Thank you. From the shutters, decorative in storm, design guidelines. Well, do you want shutters? Here are your 3 options. And don't you dare choose a color that deviates from the approved color scheme for your house. And if you have a French style, congratulations, you can only have a Leroy or a board and batten style. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Celebration's past. I hope my family and I's perspectives have humanized this curious little town a bit more, and I hope to see you visit soon. I would like to thank my parents for providing photos and memories, and for the opportunity to have grown up in such a unique, beautiful place. I would also like to thank our public events coordinator, Shay, and exhibits director, Katie Kelly, for entrusting me to do this lunch and learn as an educator. Lastly, I would like to thank Dr. Michael Callahan, Tom Sonneberg, and our oral historian, Rachel Williams, for the additional contextual information that aided in my research. Again, I want to thank you for joining us again today. We hope you enjoyed today's program and look forward to seeing you back soon.